I mean, rejection is difficult for everybody, isn't it? But certainly if rejection taps into what we call a kind of core belief. So if someone grew up with a core belief around being unlovable, for example, because maybe their parents were inconsistent in their care, for example. So they and you don't think about these beliefs consciously all the time. They're not at the forefront of your thought processes, but they will influence how you feel and they'll influence how you behave and the choices that you make. Because what happens is when we have a core belief that is a sort of damaging one or detrimental one, we develop sort of rules for living around that help us to keep it at bay. So it might be, if I can just be the perfect business owner and the perfect boyfriend and the perfect dad, then no one will reject me and everything will be okay. And so you set yourself these rules for living that if at some point, inevitably, you break or there's signs that you're not going to be able to keep up with them. And what that does is when there's signs that you're not going to keep up with those rules for living, it kind of triggers that core belief to come to the forefront. And that's when you get that rush of kind of psychological distress, because it's a distressing thing to believe about yourself. And so that's when it can cause people real problems when that sort of damaging core belief is being triggered on a regular basis, for example, maybe because it's a turbulent relationship or whatever the situation is. And that's when you can work not only on the present stuff, but on the core beliefs and looking at how those are playing out in relationships. And there's a really fascinating therapy called CAT therapy, actually. So it's cognitive analytic therapy, just CAT for short. But that's just a fascinating therapy where it looks at the relationships that you have when you're younger. So when you're growing up with parents or siblings or family. And in those relationships, you learn how to behave in the world, right? You learn about, who I am, what to expect from other people, and what to expect from the world at large. And then you develop kind of survival strategies or coping strategies for example, in a difficult relationship like that. You learn how to cope with that, and you have these kind of safety behaviors. And as you grow up, you're in a different situation, right? You're not dependent on parents and stuff like that. But those survival strategies or those safety behaviors continue, and they get played out in your adult relationships. And I just love that therapy. It's great for looking at the patterns and the cycles that people tend to feel stuck in their relationships, and how that reflects those early life experiences that are essentially outdated coping strategies. But it's really difficult. If something's been a lifetime of habit, you can't just break that by telling yourself to do that. So it takes time and it takes practice, and you literally kind of map out the cycle so that you learn to sort of acknowledge it in hindsight, first of all. So you say, okay, last week that happened, and yeah, I went around the cycle. And then eventually you've done that enough that you start to recognize it when you're in it. So as you're about to do something, you think, hang on a minute, I know what this is predictable. I know what I'm doing. And in that moment, you then get this chance. This is the beauty of kind of awareness, is you then get this chance to choose whether you go with it. And sometimes you will, and you'll go around the cycle again. And sometimes you'll do this other thing that you've already worked out you need to do, and you break the cycle. And then you get the benefits of that. And so it's this really kind of long process of sometimes going around the cycle again, and then sometimes breaking it and finding this new life that you can create in your relationships and stuff like that. So, and it's incredible how life-changing that can be for people. I don't think it's a replacement for it, but I think definitely things like journaling and reflecting on experiences and trying to look at patterns of behavior. So, I always find that, I don't know, when I'm with my boyfriend, we argue about this after I do this. And then you can literally sort of work it out on paper, just writing things down. What happened, then what happened next, then what happened next? How did I feel? How do I think they felt? How did then I feel when they said that? And you're really kind of just going through it. But keep doing that. Just doing it once won't necessarily open up everything. But when you keep doing it, you can work out patterns and the themes. And then when you start to get, a sort of knowledge of that cycle, you can then, begin to look at what's different. But sometimes it's really difficult to just know how to break the cycle. Sometimes that's a really difficult part of therapy for people, is working out, well, where can you break that cycle? Where can you exit and do something different? And what is that different thing? Because if you knew, right, you would just do it. So it's not easy. And I think, maybe that's another book to write, isn't it? It's talking about that relationship stuff, because it's so important to people. And you know, sometimes having good friendships and people that you trust to talk through these things with can help to give you that other perspective, you know, kind of fact checking some of your own, because when you're in it, it's so hard to see the wood for the trees, isn't it? It's so much easier once you've got stuff down on paper and you're kind of looking at it, you've got that bird's eye view, and that's really the process of therapy. So if you can recreate any aspects of that with a really trusted friend or loved one, then that could be helpful. I don't think it's a replacement for therapy and the model and the training, but it's certainly something.